I don't know what the weather is like where you are from, but here it hasn't cooled off just yet. But regardless, we are still embracing all things fall: pumpkins, spiced and cozy baked goods, hot bowls of chili and soup, and lots of apple flavored foods. One of my favorite things to do for every season, but fall in particular feels like I reach for this more, is go through magazines and sit down with a hot cup of coffee and look at all of this year and past years' issues for fall. I have acquired several this year, and so a hot cup of coffee will make a nice little treat to sip on while I read through what is in for fall 2025. Today we are going to try our hand at homemade bagels again. I made them last week and they were good, but not quite where they needed to be. So I am trying those today, and in my stand mixer I am just mixing up 1.5 cups of water, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1.5 tablespoons of yeast, 5 cups of flour, and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. This is a really stiff dough. I did add the water, sugar, yeast, and a couple of cups of flour first, then added in the salt, and then finished by slowly adding the rest of the flour. Now sometimes I had to turn off the mixer, let it sit for a minute before adding the rest of the flour, and definitely before kneading it again, because the dough is so stiff. But I was able to get the 5 cups in and hopefully have some better tasting bagels. Now, of course, if Mama gets her dough going, Aladon has to have her own. So she spent an afternoon in the kitchen herself.
Need some time. I'll put my hand in it so I can get it off.
Yeah?
Because my hands are...
Yeah. You kind of have to scrape them.
Want me to strip them with this?
I'm making another batch of bagels now. Normally I try to keep this stuff to voiceover because my house is really noisy, but it's quiet right now. Isla's just over here playing with dough. Jack is taking a nap, and so I wanted to talk about this while I'm thinking about it. But I made these once already. I showed you, I think. And they were really good, but they weren't quite like stiff enough of a dough, so the inside of the bagel was just really fluffy instead of dense like a normal bagel. And so I did some research, and I think I just didn't have enough flour. So I did it again before this time. This is my 3rd time. So I did it again for a 2nd time, and I did way more flour. And They did not shape right. They unraveled out of their like little circle and just didn't quite look right. They were really hard to shape. So this is actually my third time making bagels, and I did do more flour, but we're gonna see. I looked up ways to shape it, and we're gonna try to make them a little smoother and to make the bottom stick together more. I don't know, if this doesn't go well, I guess I'll just fall back to the other recipe, the less flour. When I cut into the first ones with the less flour, they just had more of a fluffy texture instead of that dense inside that you want in a bagel, and they didn't have like that bagel-y taste. And so the second time I did it, they had the right texture on the inside and the right flavor, but they didn't shape well. They were so ugly and so difficult. So hopefully third time's a charm. A very big bagel fan, and so is Isla, and they love cream cheese with it. It's a big hit in our house, so I'm hoping I can get these down correctly. So I'm gonna let this rise, then I'll punch it down the same way I normally do, and then move on with the shaping and rising again and boiling and baking. But I wanted to say that because sometimes in the voiceovers, when I come back to talk to y'all, I totally forget things or things get left out because I'm not in the moment. So I thought I'm going to say this while I'm doing this, that these are bagels and that I've tried this 3 times, and that is why you're seeing so much of it and kind of where I'm at with trying recipes. I know sometimes on the internet it can look really easy, like they just know how to bake all these things, and I'm here to tell you and show you that that's not real life. And sometimes I have to try things so many times to get them to turn out right or somewhat right. So if you think that everything is straightforward for me, just know it is not, and I have to try everything many times before I get it right. So hopefully these turn out this time. Something that we have quite often year round, but it has been especially comforting in the fall, this fall season, with a bowl of tomato soup, is hot ham and cheese sandwiches. So I'm just taking a loaf of homemade bread and slicing it pretty thin and coating both sides of the bread in mayonnaise. I know when I was growing up, everybody did butter on the outside for grilled cheese, but I recently read that mayonnaise makes a better grilled cheese, so we are trying it today with these hot ham and cheese sandwiches. Now the hams that I buy are just pre-cooked from the grocery store, and I'm hoping soon to have a source for local pork. But for now, these are our favorite. I buy them all the time. And I'm just grilling that on my cast iron grill pan.
Like real.
Sometimes those little pumpkins like that are called Jack be Little. Like our little Jackie here. No, you stay right here with Mama. Daisy out there. You hear her bell?
You know what would really be cute with these?
Bagels pretty much go like any other bread product. You mix the dough, you let it rise until doubled, you punch it down, and then you shape and let it rise again, and then baking. With bagels, there's just one added step, that right before you bake them, you boil them. And that is what helps get that outer crust and the right flavor. I'm just dividing the bagels into 8 equal pieces. And since this dough is so stiff, it's important how you actually shape them. And so first I kind of flatten it just a little bit into a square, and I cut it into kind of 4 triangle square shaped pieces, and then I take those and divide them into 2, and I make sure that they are in the shape of a triangle. You don't want to try and knead those pieces too much or shape them too much from the original shape that you cut it, because the dough is so stiff, it just will not hold together. So the best way to do it, cut it into the triangles, and then the longest smooth side, you tuck the 2 ends under, and then you place it on the counter and swirl it with your hand and use the friction of the counter to get the really round, tight ball of dough. Then you just take your finger, stick it through the center to get the hole, and then I like to put a finger through each center and then kind of swirl my finger so that it opens up the center of the bagel. Now I'm just going to let them rise until puffy. While these rise though, I am getting a pot of water on to boil and putting in 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of baking soda. Once that comes to a boil, usually the bagels are ready to go, and I just drop them one by one into the boiling water and boil on each side for about a minute, and then place them back on this parchment paper. The parchment paper is very important because they will stick to anything else. Now while they are boiling, I also am preheating the oven to 425 degrees, and then once all of them have been boiled, you add on your toppings if you want. Today I did a cinnamon crunch, and I wasn't super happy with the outcome of them. The flavor was really good. I didn't bake them quite long enough. You have to bake the ones with the toppings a little bit longer, and they were a little messy looking, so I'm still working on that. But you would add all your toppings as soon as they come out of the boiling water, and then bake for about 25 minutes in a 425 degree oven. Okay, y'all, it is rest time for the kids. I am thinking about supper. I flipped through these magazines yesterday looking for some fall recipes, and I think I found one I'm going to make tonight. We don't eat a lot of fish, but salmon we eat here and there. And I found a fall recipe for an apple cider salmon. Apple cider glazed salmon. Let me find it. Here it is. It's a cider glazed salmon, and she says with green beans and potatoes. I'm going to do rice and whatever frozen vegetable I have, because I don't want potatoes with it. But it's just a cup of apple cider, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of soy sauce. I'll use coconut aminos, and then some ginger. I'm gonna do powdered, and paprika and garlic, and butter and salt and pepper, and of course the salmon. So I think you just bring it all to a boil and then simmer it until it's a glaze. You brush the salmon with the glaze and you save some for after, and then you bake your salmon. Brush the salmon with the reserved glaze. So I'm going to make that tonight. I have some apple cider and we already have the salmon. I need to go get my salmon out to thaw. It's frozen. And I don't think you're supposed to thaw frozen salmon, but I'm going to anyway. So this is in the fall 2025 edition of Pioneer Woman magazine. There it is. If you have it, no, that's not it. Where did it go? And then there it is. If you have this, it's on page 69. There's actually lots of good recipes in this issue. There's a chicken Caesar salad. There's some street tacos I probably won't make. They're a little fancy. There's a meatloaf, and we are big fans of meatloaf. That's one of those things that you can make seasonally. So in the summer, you can do fresh herbs and chunks of tomatoes and peppers. And then in the fall, you can do like a butternut squash and, you know, really anything that you want. So that's what we're going to make tonight. I just got the bagels done. That was the third time I've made them. This time I did half plain and half cinnamon crunch, brown sugar cinnamon crunch, and I'm going to try those. Those were for me. But I'm going to take our cream cheese that I made up this past summer from our raw dairy that we get, and I'm going to flavor it with some strawberry jam, some vanilla, a little bit of powdered sugar, and make our own berry cream cheese spread. We buy it a lot and it gets expensive and we go through it really fast. So I'm going to try and make our own and see what we think. But I was sitting here going through fall magazines, which is one of my favorite places. I love a good cookbook. I do. But I also really love magazines, and I find that they're way more seasonal with like maybe seasonal versions of regular food. And I find that they're way more seasonal, like seasonal versions of food versus just like the basic recipes that are in cookbooks. And so I really, really like them. So I usually try and grab, which magazines get expensive, so if you subscribe, they're cheaper. And then some people think they're clutter, but I love them. If I get tired of them, I will just pass them on, and then other people enjoy them too. But obviously Pioneer Woman, we have a local magazine called Due South, Country Living, anything Country Living and Southern Living. And then I grabbed the Victoria Classic this last week to thumb through. I'm more of a Southern lady of this Hoffman Media. I'm more like the Southern Lady magazine, but I couldn't find it. So that's really sad. But this Victoria magazine has some really pretty photos. The recipes aren't quite my style. They're a little fancy and, you know, more extreme than I will probably go. But the food looks phenomenal. Like, oh my goodness. It's kind of a glare, but all the food is very pretty and it sounds delicious. It's just probably not something I would make. So I love having magazines, and I suggest or encourage that if you're looking for seasonal recipes, maybe check out magazines, because they tend to have more seasonal versions of things. Now, some of my cookbooks do too. My Brenda Gant, her third cookbook is more fall themed. So I'll thumb through that too and find some stuff. I pretty much know what's in all of her cookbooks and what I want to make and all of that. And so I've made so many things out of there so many times. But might I suggest magazines? They're beautiful laying out. I keep mine here when Jack doesn't pull them on the floor, and they are just really, really fun to have and very inspirational, and I love them. I also love Front Porch Life magazine, and I said Southern Lady, Southern Living. Daughters magazine is another good one, and it's a Christian based if you're looking for something like that. And so those are some of my favorite. Southern Living, Country Living, Victoria, Pioneer Woman, Southern Lady, Daughters, Front Porch Life. Some of those are more big name and some of them are more smaller publications, but a mix of all of them is great. And so I love to just find inspiration in magazines. So thought I would just share what I'm going to do while it's kind of quiet in my house, because later it will not be quiet. And I was sitting here thinking about it and thinking through what all I needed for supper and what to do, because I'm going to have to do that here any minute. But I just finished the bagels. I'm taking a little rest for a second, and then I'm probably going to go cut a bagel open and see how they turned out. Now, those bagels, I actually had to put them in the fridge last night. We got some really bad storms. They were calling for tornadoes, and it's not really tornado season, so it was very odd. But they were calling for tornadoes, and about the time that I needed to shape them and start boiling, the power was going on and off, and it was raining really hard, so I just threw the entire bowl of dough in the fridge, and then this morning I got it out and I let it sit out for a couple hours to kind of warm up, and then I shaped and let them rise, and then boiled them, and then baked them, and it turned out just fine. Let's light some candles and make a delicious supper tonight. I will say this is a glaze that I will have made up and in the freezer that I can just thaw out all fall, or just keep it made and in the refrigerator. You can make it ahead of time, so then you can just pull it out and put it on your meat. This was so good. My husband loved it. I loved it. So from now on, that is what I'll be doing. This will be good on chicken and pork and fish. And you could just drizzle it over like a sheet pan dinner or just over your meat. This was just one of those little additions to a basic meal that we have all the time that really took it up a notch and made it feel just a little bit fancy. So I read you the recipe as it was in the magazine, but I didn't have everything in the magazine, and some of it was just something I'm not going to keep on hand. Things like fresh ginger and also soy sauce, those are not things I keep on hand, so I just subbed with what I had. So here's what I actually did. In a small pot on the stove on medium to high heat, I added a cup of apple cider, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of coconut aminos, a teaspoon of ground ginger, a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika, 2 minced garlic cloves, and I started cooking that until it came to a boil. I let it boil for just a few minutes, and then I lowered the heat and allowed it to simmer until it was slightly thickened, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. I stirred it often to keep it from burning. Once it was thickened, I poured in the juice from half of a lemon and about 2 tablespoons of butter, and then stirred until that was melted and combined. And while that all simmered, I preheated the oven to 400 degrees. I dried off my salmon and then placed it in a greased baking dish, and I covered it in salt and pepper. And then once the sauce was ready, I took a brush and just heavily coated the salmon with that glaze and baked it for about 18 minutes. It was partially frozen. Now when the salmon came out of the oven, I immediately coated it in remaining glaze. You don't use all the glaze when you initially coat it before it bakes. If it is still hot where you live, I would highly recommend fall meals like this that are very reflective of the season. And so this added the perfect fall touch to an otherwise very light and fresh meal. Perfect for the time of year that we're in, while we are still having 80 and 90 degree afternoons, but the mornings are chilly and we are officially in fall. I hope that you have a great week, and thanks for stopping by.